Welcome back, guys. So today's video I wanted to revisit the basic bassline that we set up in the first video around creating your own basslines and expand upon that using what I've covered in the last few videos around the major and minor scale shapes and the modes. Now there's a couple of basic principles that I use myself when coming up with a bassline and developing it into something a bit more melodic and a bit more interesting to listen to. Obviously it's all within the context of the song, what suits it, and sometimes just really simple is the best way to go. But if you've got a very basic chord structure, and we're revisiting the one from the first video, so in that case we were playing a G, a C, a D, a C, and back to the G again. So really simple bass line, and our initial sort of lines were something along like this. Okay, now the principles that I want to go to today are that of leading notes or passing notes, and walking up or down to your chord notes. And these two principles work around knowing what's available to you within any given key. So the first principle, leading note, is just that. It's a note that leads into the note you're aiming for. So if you're working within the major scale, which we are here today, in this case in the key of G, we can use various notes to lead into, and the best way to start with this is to find the note that's either one above or one below the note that you're aiming for. So if we're going from G to a C, then we've got the option of the B or the D to move into that note. So you can start on the G and use that B as a walking up to it, or use the D and come down to it. It's very basic, and that will work for any other note as well. Now, so if we're going to the C to the D rather, then obviously we're on the note below it, so my next port of call would be the note above it, so which would be the E, which is the sixth of the major scale. Okay, and then walking up or down to a note, it's the same principle. You're just using one or two more extra notes to get to that point. So from the C going back down to the G, what I might do is walk down using the B and the A, going back down to the G. Also, equally, I could use a leading note and using the F sharp below the G, which would be my seventh but an octave lower, and go from here okay, so it's really easy principle to use, but the knowledge of the major scale shape is a really useful thing to use, and especially the expanded shape that I covered in the other video. It allows you to cover in sort of different areas of the neck. So in practice this sounds something along the lines of this. From our basic bass line, we can move into something like this. So already we're sounding a lot more interesting around that very simple bass line. Now the sort of expanding upon that is to start using sort of more notes of the scale to work towards the note that you're aiming for. Now we'll keep this fairly simple. The best sort of note to aim for is a fifth above the note that you're aiming for, because if you remember from the modes, the Mixolydian note mixed leading scale, the fifth leads naturally back to the root note, and that's the case on any given chord, that the fifth of that note will lead to the root of that chord. So if we're in the key of G, then our fifth is the D. For the C chord, the fifth would be the G, and for the D chord, the fifth would be the A. So if we're aiming for those, well, the G to the C, we're already on the fifth, so it's a natural sort of leading on to that one. So using the walking or the leading notes is the best way. Onto the D, that is the sort of move that I would normally go to naturally. I didn't really think about that too much. So the C, what I'm doing there is going to the leading note, so the E above the D, but then walking up with the G and the A, and the A being the fifth, leads nicely to the D. And then we can use the D as a fifth back down to the G. So throwing these all together, here's a few sort of examples within that just the basic chord structure that would be sort of my starting point for any given bass line. Just playing around with a few there. I wouldn't necessarily use all of those variations with one bass line, because that would make it seem a little bit sort of groundless. It wouldn't sort of flow so naturally. But there's sort of some of the ideas I would play around with within a normal chord structure in sort of developing something that sounds a little bit more interesting. So that's it really, the basic principle. Find the note above or below the note that you're aiming for and see if that leads nicely into that one. And if you're doing a bit of a bigger jump, then you've got more space, then a few notes above or below, and you can walk up or down to the note you're aiming for. So have a play around with that and enjoy, and we'll see you next time.